Hey YouTube, welcome back to my neck of the woods. My name's Deco, where I share my experience and my knowledge, hoping to lessen your learning curve along the way. So today I'm going to talk about how to learn how to fish for striped bass. I predominantly fish in the surf on beaches, a little bit on jetties, a little bit on rocks, but I'm going to talk about fishing in the surf on beaches, what to look for, and how to get started. If you're frustrated and you're out there and you're not catching fish, I'm going to tell you how to catch some fish. There's a shortage of videos on YouTube exactly telling you how to catch fish. There's people saying, well, I have a sure way to do this and a sure way to do this, or you got to use this lure, or you got to use this. I think a lot of it is misleading. So I'm going to tell you all the things that I do and the things that I've learned over the past probably 6 years or so, and how I'm having success now. And something has just recently clicked. I've gotten out there, something has clicked, and I'm having more success than I normally have in the past, and consistent success, similar to hunting. You know, when you get your first deer, or you get a couple deer, you know, something clicks, and all you have to do is repeat that success and build upon it to get better. Before I get started, please sub my channel, like my videos, and make some comments. You know that I love the comments. So here we go. So these are mistakes that I have made over the past. I'm no expert, but I think this will give you a good insight on what you need to do to get started striped bass fishing. Now, I mainly fish bait. All this advice comes from fishing bait. Chunk bait in the surf at the beach. All right, so first thing you want to do is you want to get out there, and you want to get out there and fish as much as you possibly can. If you could be all in, that'd be great. But if you can only get out once a week or once a month, you got to work with what you have, right? So you want to get out there as much as you possibly can, and what you want to do is you want to choose one beach. You want to choose one beach. You don't want to choose a whole bunch of beaches. You want to say, well, I want to try here, and I want to try here, and I want to try here. Chances are you're going to get lucky if you're on the fish that day. But you want to find one beach, and you really want to pick that beach apart. I learned that in the last couple of years. Before, I would go out and try a whole bunch of different beaches, and I say, well, I didn't catch them at this beach, and maybe I'll try this beach, or I'll try this beach, or I'll try off a jetty here, or off the rocks here. And I found that I did get lucky every once in a while, but I wasn't consistent. I wasn't finding the fish consistently. So you find one beach, and you want to pick it apart. And you want to visit that beach at high and low tide, and any other tide in between, and you want to see what is underneath the water. Now you're looking for things. You're looking for what's called a trough, or a spillway, or a hole, or a structure. These are things that are going to hold striped bass. Ultimately, they're going to hold bait, and striped bass want to ambush those, right? So I'll tell you what a trough is. A trough is exactly what you think it is. You know, like a trough that like pigs eat out of or something like that. It's a long, sunken area on the beach. And it's just like a trough. It's a sunken area. You know, a pig eats out of a trough, you know, just a sunken area, or a box, so to speak. It's going to have a high side on one side, and it's just going to be dug out, usually from the surf or from storms or things like that. It's going to be a concaved area in the beach. And what the bass are going to run in that, and the bait fish are going to run in that, and they're essentially going to ambush those fish. All right, a spillway. A spillway is a lot of times you're going to have two high areas and then maybe a river going through that. It's usually how the water, when the tide comes in, is going to spill into the sort of the inner half of the beach, inside the high tide line, you know what I mean? Or towards the high tide line. And fish and bait fish are going to find those areas. Now, these are areas that you're probably going to visualize during low tide. Now, you want to do whatever you can to remember it. Maybe there's a house on the beach, or a piece of structure, or something that isn't going to move, that you can mark where that is when you come back to the beach when it's covered in water. A hole is just what it is. It's a concaved area inside the sand or the beach, or behind a rock even, that is going to hold bait fish, and there in turn will hold striped bass. Striped bass are opportunists. They go in current, and sometimes they sit outside the current waiting for bait fish to come by and ambush them. All right, so that's what you want to do. You want to get out there and read the beach. You want to read one beach, and you want to fish these areas. You want to fish these areas that statistically hold more fish than other spots in the beach. I'm not saying they're not going to be in other spots, but you want to consistently sort of target those areas. Now, how do you pick up these areas when it's covered in water? Ultimately, when the waves crash, that just means that there's a shallow area. So the waves will mimic what's underneath the water. They'll mirror it, so to speak. So say there's an area underneath the water that goes like this, right? Right? The waves are going to do the same thing on top. They're going to crash, they're going to crash, they're going to crash. They're going to crash at the shallow points, not the deeper points. So if you don't see any waves, so say you see like crashing waves coming along this way and crashing waves coming along this way, but they're not crashing in the middle at that point, that is probably a hole. It's probably an area that's deeper. And that's an area that you want to target for fish, especially bait fishing. Like I said, I do bait fishing, or it can be considered bottom fishing for the most part. I'm going to tell you what I use for a rig. I don't want this video to be too long, but you want to target those areas. You want to target the areas that don't have surf, so to speak. So like say you got crashing waves here and crashing waves here. That area in the middle, that's where you want to put your bait. Or you want to put your bait beyond that, and then you can slowly sort of jig it in past that area. Or you could put it at an angle, but ultimately you want your bait to cross that area at some point in time. Now a trough I think it's a little more difficult to identify, and it's just where the waves crash. So the waves are gonna break, right? You're gonna see that white water, and a lot of times the trough is in front of that break. So the wave comes in, it hits that shallow water, and it's going to crash over the trough. Sometimes it's behind too, but I found on some of the beaches that I'm at, you're going to see that. Now, what you want to do is you want to get out there at low tide, examine the beach, and then take pictures, do whatever you have to do to remember that area, and then go back at high tide and see what the waves do, so you can pinpoint those areas. It's almost like you're going to be able to see them better when the water is over it than when it's not. I know it sounds silly, but once I started reading the beach, my success has gone up. My ability to catch fish, almost every time I go out I catch fish, and then I'm consistently catching bigger fish lately, more in the last this season, so to speak, a little bit last season. Now I'm out to catch, just to give you a little history about myself, I'm not out to catch giant fish. 28 to 35 inches, those are the slot size fish here in Massachusetts. Those are the ones I can bring home and feed my family and put in my freezer. Those are the ones that I'm looking for. I'm looking for fish that I can take home. If you're more of a sport fisherman, you can still target these same areas. Same thing with like rocks. You see rocks and you see things coming, waves crashing over. You want to find those holes, those deeper areas where that's going to hold fish. Right? Now what I use for a rig, I use chunk bait mostly. All this advice usually goes around to chunk bait. I use mackerel. I haven't used pogies or bunker, but for the most part I use chunk mackerel, and I will put it on a rig like this. Oh, I had a couple of them. So I'll put it on a rig. Of course it's all wound up here, right? Let me unwind it here. A rig like this. These are surgeon's knots. I have a video on my channel about surgeon's knots. So I'll put a hook here, right? And then I will put either a second hook here or a teaser. I think a teaser is very, very important. And I didn't figure this out until maybe the end of last year or this season, how much the teaser makes a difference. I'll give you a real life example. So there was this year, and I was talking to a buddy of mine about this. This year, there may be 4 or 5 of us lined up on the beach. And for some reason, so say I was in the middle, right? So I'm in the middle, and there's 2 people on this side of me and 2 people on this side of me. We're all using chunk mackerel. We're not using anything different. Now we are using different rigs, and maybe our distance being able to cast is a little different, but for the most part, our technique is relatively the same. And a lot of times I will get a hit or catch a fish when no one else will. And I attribute it to the teaser. A teaser is just, it's really anything. It could be like a little plastic squid, or it could be a bucktail. Mine's very similar to a bucktail, and I put some jig strips on it. I think having that visual, jigging your bait across the bottom, is going to attract more fish. I'm not 100% about this, but I've already seen it. I've already seen it where I've been fishing and there'd be people up and down and I'd be the only one catching fish. I don't think I'm that lucky all the time. I just think that the rig is giving a little bit more of a visual. Now, I never catch fish on this teaser, never. It has a hook in it, but I never catch fish on it. I always catch fish on the chunk. But what I do is I cast out there as far as I can or whatnot. It really doesn't matter too far. Sometimes they're right on shore. And I'm constantly jigging the bait. I'm pulling it back, and I'm pulling it back, and I'm just bouncing it off the bottom, continuously figuring out how much tension I need on the line. So I'm always trying to get tension. So I pull it, make sure I got the bait there. Maybe I'll leave it alone, reel a little bit, and I just slowly jig it, bounce it off the bottom, back to me, and then I cast it out again. You will find success if you do this. I'm just here to help. All right, that's all I really have for you. Check out some of my other videos, and I'll talk to you later. Be well.